In the last lecture, we created our very first Angular project. So we have our Angular project ready with all the required files and folders and also the dependent packages. Now we need a code editor to edit the files and write some Angular code. For that, I am going to use Visual Studio Code as my code editor for this course. Now if you don't like VS Code, then feel free to use any other code editor of your choice. But if you want to follow along with me, then you can also download and install VS Code in your local machine. For that, head over to code.visualstudio.com and from here you can download and install VS Code. Now if the operating system of your machine is not automatically selected here, then you can select it from this drop-down list and then you can click on this download button. Once you click on this download button, an installer will be downloaded. Double click on that installer and follow the installation steps to install VS Code in your machine. Once the VS Code is installed, open VS Code. And now we want to open our Angular project in VS Code. For that, go to File, Open Folder, and then go to the location where your project file is located. In my case, it is in C drive, Angular course folder. And this is the project which we created in our last lecture. So select this project folder and click on this Select Folder button. It will open the Angular project in VS Code. Currently, this project is running at localhost and port number 4200. So if you type this URL in the browser and press enter, you should be able to view this web page. This is the default look of an Angular application when we create a brand new Angular project. Now, if you're not able to see this web page, that means your live development server might be terminated. That means your live development server is not running. So, for example, if I go to command prompt, you will notice that for me, the live development server is still running. But for you, if this live development server is not running, then you won't be able to view this web page. So in order to view this web page, you will have to restart the live development server. So let me show you how to do that. But before that, let's first terminate this live development server. And for that, you can press Ctrl C on your keyboard. It will ask if you really want to terminate the job. Type Y and press enter. So now the live development server has been terminated. And now if I go to the web page and if I refresh the page, I should not be able to view this web page. As you can see here, this web page will only be visible at this localhost port number 4200 if the live development server is running. And we have terminated our live development server, and that's why I'm not able to view this web page. Now, in order to restart the live development server, we need to type ng serve command. If I press enter, the Angular project will be recompiled, the bundles will be generated, and it will restart the live development server. So now the live development server should be restarted. And now if I go to the web page, now you can see that now this web page is visible. So to terminate a live development server, you can press Ctrl C on your keyboard. And to restart the development server, you can run this command ng serve. Now remember that you can only run this command, this ng serve command, if you are in the project folder. So first you need to move to the project folder using cd command, and when you are in the project folder, then you can run this ng serve command to start the live development server. So now let's go ahead and modify this project a little bit and understand how the Angular application actually works. For that, open VS Code and now go to this source folder. This source folder is the main folder with which you will be working the most. This source folder is going to contain all the Angular related code of your application. Inside this source folder, we have this app folder, and this app folder has a bunch of files. Now we will talk about each of these files one by one in a bit. But for now, let's go to this app component.html file. And in this app component.html file, we have some HTML and CSS code. And it is this HTML and CSS which is being rendered in the web page. So the content which you see here in this web page is coming from this app component.html file. Okay, so if I go ahead and delete everything from here, and now if I save the changes and go to the web page, you will see that now the web page is empty. Now here, let's go ahead and let's add one h1 element. or maybe h2 element. And let's also add a paragraph element. And now if we save the changes and if we go to the web page, this h2 element and this paragraph element should be rendered in the web page. Okay, so the h2 element and the paragraph element has been rendered in the web page. Now here we are writing static HTML. But to write a static HTML, we don't need any framework like Angular. We use Angular to generate content dynamically in the web page, right? So for writing static HTML, we don't need Angular at all. So what I'm going to do here is, here I'm going to remove this text, and instead of this text, I'm going to use a set of curly braces like this, and inside this curly braces, I will use title. Now I will explain you what this title is in a bit. But now let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page. And in the web page, you will see Welcome to Angular Basics. So for somehow, Angular is replacing this title with this value Angular Basics when we are rendering Angular app in the browser. So here Angular is doing its job. It is generating some content dynamically and it is replacing this title with that content. And this is what we use Angular for. We use Angular to generate dynamic contents. And Angular allows us to mix static HTML code with dynamic things we want to output in that code. So here you can see with the static HTML, we are also mixing some dynamic TypeScript code. Now the next question is, from where the value of this title is coming? How does Angular know that it has replaced this title with this value Angular Basics? For that, we have another file appcomponent.ts here, and this is a TypeScript file. And in this file, we have a class called appComponent. And this appComponent class has this title property, which is assigned with this value Angular Basics. And this is the value which we are seeing in the web page, right? So what Angular is doing is, it is replacing this title with the value of this title property when we are rendering this HTML in the browser. And here we are using an Angular feature which is data binding. Now we will talk about data binding in great detail in the future lecture of this course. But for now, just understand that for this app component class, we have this title property which is assigned with this value Angular Basics. So when we are using this title property within a set of opening and closing curly braces, this title is being replaced by the value of this title property in the web page. Now if we change the value of this title property here, so from Angular Basics, if I change it to Angular App, now in the web page, it should be rendering Angular App. Okay, so this title here is being replaced by the value of this title property. Let's go ahead and let's add one more property here, and let's say this property is message. Let's assign some string value to this. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's use this message property in this appcomponent.html file. So I'm going to create one more paragraph element, and inside this paragraph element we want to use the value of the message property. Now we cannot type message like this. In that case, this message will be rendered in the web page. But here we want to display the value stored in this message property. So we need to wrap this message property within a set of opening and closing curly braces like this. Okay, now if I go ahead and save the changes and if I go to the web page, we should have one more paragraph element with the value which we have assigned to the message property of appComponent class, as you can see here. Now in this app folder, we have 4 files: this appcomponent.css file, appcomponent.html file, appcomponent.spec.ts file, and appcomponent.ts file. Now we also have this appmodule.ts file, and we will talk about it later. But for now, just understand that these 4 files together, this CSS file, HTML file, spec.ts file, and this component.ts file, these 4 files together makes a component in Angular. So here, these 4 files together are making this app component. Currently, for this project, we have only one component. But remember that an Angular application consists of several components. And we will talk about components in great detail in our coming lectures. But for now, Just understand that when we created this Angular project using Angular CLI, by default, Angular CLI provided us with one component, which is this app component. And an app component has four main files: the component.css file, component.html file, component.spec.ts file, and component.ts file. And this component.ts file is a TypeScript file, and this is the main component file. Inside this file, we create our component. So inside this file, if you see, we have this app component class, and this is our app component. Inside this class, we can specify some properties and methods which we can use in the HTML file of that component. And each component will also have an HTML file. So for this app component, we have this app component.html file. This file contains some HTML code, and an HTML file of a component is called as its view template. So this app component.html is the view template for this app component class. Okay. Then a component can also have a CSS file, and inside this CSS file, we can write some CSS styles which we want to apply to the view template. So if we want to apply some CSS to the view template, that means to the app component.html file, we can write that CSS inside this app component.css file. So in this file, we have one h2 element and two paragraph elements. Let's go ahead and let's specify some style for these elements. So here I want to select a font family. Let's select this one, and let's also specify the color. And here maybe let's select brown. Let's also specify some style for paragraph. Again, let's select the font family, and let's select the first one, and let's also set the font size maybe to 16 pixel. Let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page, and now you can see this h2 element and the paragraph elements are styled accordingly. So for the HTML of the component, we can specify CSS style in the app component.css file. Then we also have app component.spec.ts file, and this file contains some TypeScript code for testing a component. So if you want to write some code for testing this app component, you can write it inside this spec.ts file. For now, we are not going to worry about testing components. Alright, let's close these files here. Now we learned that when we are running this Angular app, it is rendering this content in the web page, and that's what we have seen here. But if I inspect the page source of this web page, you will notice that here we have some HTML code, and we have this head section with some meta tags, this title tag and this link tag. Then we also have this body section. But in this body section, do you see any h2 element or the paragraph element? In the web page, we have one h2 element and two paragraph elements. But when we are viewing the source code of this web page, in the body section, we don't have any h2 element or the paragraph element. Instead, we have this strange app root. And somehow, this app root is being replaced by the content of this app component.html file. And that's why in the web page, we are seeing this h2 element and these two paragraph elements. So what is this app root here? If I go to VS Code and if I go to app component.ts file, for this app component class, you will notice that we have a component decorator. And to this component decorator, we have passed an anonymous object. And this object has a selector property, which is assigned with the value app root. So when you assign a value to a selector, that value can be used like an HTML tag. Okay, so this app root, since it is a selector value, we can use it like an HTML tag. And that's what you're seeing here. This app root is being used like an HTML tag. And when we are using this app root tag, this app root selector as an HTML tag, there the content of this app component.html is being replaced, right? But where are we actually using this app root tag? So in the very first lecture, we learned that with Angular, we create single page application. And in a single page application, we have only one HTML file which gets rendered in the browser. And when we navigate around or do some other stuff, only the content of that file changes. The file itself never changes. And that one HTML file which has been rendered here in this web page when we run this Angular project is this index.html file. So it is this file which is being rendered in the browser when we are running this Angular project. And this index.html file has this app root tag. Okay, so when we are running this Angular project in the browser, this index.html file will be loaded. And there, this app root tag will be replaced by the content of this app component.html. But why? That's because for this selector, this app root selector, here we have this template URL property. And this template URL property is assigned with the path of this app component.html. So wherever we will use this app root selector, there that app root will be replaced with the content of this app component.html file, because for this selector the view template is this app component.html file. Okay, so wherever we will use this app root as an HTML tag, there that app root will be replaced with the content of this app component.html file whenever the web page will be rendered in the browser. And that's why inside this index.html, when we have used this app root tag, we have used this app root selector as an HTML tag, when this index.html will be rendered in the browser, this app root will be replaced with the content of this app component.html file, because this app component.html file is the view template for this app root selector. I hope it makes sense here. Let's understand this diagrammatically. So when we run our Angular app in the browser, first of all, index.html file gets loaded in the browser. In the index.html file, we are using this app root selector as an HTML tag. And this app root is a selector for app component. And for this app root, the view template is this app.component.html file. So wherever we will use this app root as an HTML tag, there the content of this app component.html file will be replaced. Okay? So let's quickly recap what we have learned in this lecture. When we run Angular app, index.html file gets rendered in the web page. This is the main HTML file whose content will change when we navigate around or do some other stuff on the web page. An Angular app consists of components, and by default, when we create a new Angular project, Angular CLI provides us with one app component. Each component has 4 important files: the component.ts file, the component.html file, the component.css file, and the component.spec.ts file. The component.ts file is the main component file with the component class. And the HTML file of a component is called as its view template. So this is all from this lecture. Thank you for listening and have a great day.